The moment Kelly Benson was escorted off Flight 2187, her career didn't just end, it combusted. 15 years as a senior flight attendant. Gone in 15 minutes. Her face, ashen with shock, appeared on every news outlet from CNN to local stations across America. Her name trended higher than the president's latest controversy. Her personnel file, once confidential, now dissected by strangers who'd never met her. All because she told a black teenager to move to the back of the plane. But that wasn't even the most explosive part. While Kelly was being led away, 17-year-old Tyrone Carter sat frozen in the last row of the aircraft, watching his phone notifications explode. Hashtag Justice for Tyrone had reached 1 million mentions before the plane even touched down in Atlanta. His DMs flooded with interview requests from major networks. Celebrities were sharing his story. "This is what happens when you mess with the wrong one," someone commented. Except Tyrone wasn't the wrong one. He was just a kid from Detroit with a dream and a boarding pass for seat 17C. The real wrong one was sitting across the aisle, watching everything unfold with calculated precision. Dr. Lena Brooks. Corporate lawyer. Real estate investor. Tech entrepreneur. Net worth, $347 million. And the woman who just documented everything. "I didn't do this for attention," Lena would later tell Anderson Cooper. "I did it because I remember being 17 and powerless. The difference is I'm not powerless anymore." That interview would air exactly 12 hours after Kelly Benson marched Tyrone to the back of the plane. By then, Delta Airlines had already terminated her employment, issued a public apology, and announced a company-wide racial sensitivity training program. Too little too late. Because what nobody realized, not Kelly, not the airline executives, not even Tyrone himself, was that this wasn't just about one flight attendant's prejudice or one teenager's humiliation. This was about power. Who has it? Who doesn't? And what happens when the tables unexpectedly turn? For 15 years, Kelly Benson had wielded her authority over thousands of passengers. She decided who got extra pillows, who received upgrade considerations, whose complaints were taken seriously. For 17 years, Tyrone Carter had navigated a world that constantly reminded him of his place in it. Teachers who assumed he couldn't read at grade level. Store security that followed him through aisles. Neighbors who crossed the street when they saw him coming. And for 39 years, Lena Brooks had been building an empire specifically designed for moments like this. "Some people collect art," she once said in a rare Forbes interview. "I collect receipts." The collision of these three lives on Flight 2187 wasn't just another viral moment in America's ongoing racial reckoning. It was a perfect storm. One that would expose not just a single act of discrimination, but an entire system designed to protect those who perpetuate it, until protecting them becomes too costly. This is the story of what really happened on that flight. This is the story of what the headlines didn't tell you. This is the story of how wealth changed the equation of racial justice, for better and for worse. And it begins, as these stories often do, with a mother's sacrifice and a son's ambition. Have you ever wondered what you would do if you witnessed blatant discrimination? Would you speak up? Would you record it? Or would you look away, pretending it wasn't happening? For most of us, the answer depends on what we have to lose. But for Lena Brooks, the question wasn't what she had to lose. It was what she had to gain. And for Tyrone Carter, sitting in that back row by the bathroom, watching his phone light up with notifications, the question wasn't about justice at all. It was much simpler. How do you return to normal life after the whole world has seen you at your most vulnerable moment? The answer would surprise everyone, especially Kelly Benson, who was about to discover that losing her job was just the beginning of her nightmare. Because sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one making the most noise. It's the one quietly taking notes. Monica Carter had been saving for this trip since January. Every extra shift at Detroit Memorial Hospital, where she worked as a nursing assistant. Every birthday check from relatives. Every tax return dollar. All of it went into the Tyrone's future envelope she kept hidden behind the broken tile in their bathroom. By June, she had exactly $437. Just enough for a round-trip ticket to Atlanta and 3 nights in a budget hotel near the conference center. "You sure you don't want me to help pay for this?" Tyrone had asked when she showed him the confirmation email. "I could pick up more hours at Mr. Washington's store." Monica shook her head firmly. "No way. You focus on your grades and that application essay. This leadership program could change everything for you." What she didn't tell him was how she'd skipped lunch for months. How she'd been taking the bus in Michigan winter rather than fixing her car's heater. How she'd negotiated with their landlord to delay rent by 2 weeks so she could book the flight before prices increased. Some sacrifices you don't share with your children. Some burdens you carry alone. Tyrone knew anyway. He always did. The way he quietly made dinner on nights she worked late. The way he never asked for new shoes even when his old ones had holes. The way he maintained a 3.9 GPA despite their neighborhood high school having the lowest funding in the district. Detroit's West Side wasn't known for producing success stories. It was known for producing statistics. But Monica had decided long ago that her son wouldn't be one of them. "You're going to be somebody," she'd tell him since he was small. "Somebody who changes things." The Youth Business Leadership Conference in Atlanta represented everything they'd been working toward. Only 50 students nationwide were selected. The program included mentorship from successful entrepreneurs, workshops on business development, and, most importantly, college recruiters looking for promising candidates. For Tyrone, it wasn't just about getting out of Detroit. It was about coming back with the skills to make it better. "I want to start a tech training program for kids in our neighborhood," he'd written in his application essay. "Not just coding but business skills. How to turn ideas into companies. How to create jobs instead of just applying for them." The acceptance letter had arrived on a Tuesday. Monica had framed it and hung it next to his 8th grade spelling bee certificate, the only 2 decorations in their small apartment besides family photos. That night they'd splurged on pizza delivery. A rare celebration. "When you're running your company someday," Monica had said, "remember this moment. Remember where you started." Tyrone nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead. The conference schedule. The business leaders he'd meet. The impression he needed to make. He'd packed his suitcase 2 weeks early. 1 dress shirt, carefully ironed. 1 pair of khakis. 1 tie that had belonged to his grandfather. Notebooks. Pens. His ancient laptop with the cracked screen. The morning of the flight, Monica had pressed a small envelope into his hand. "Emergency money," she said. "Only use it if you absolutely have to." It contained $50, nearly a day's wages for her. Tyrone hugged her tightly, inhaling the scent of her coconut hair oil and hospital antiseptic. The familiar smell of sacrifice. "I won't let you down," he promised. "You never have," she replied. The Detroit Metropolitan Airport had intimidated him at first. The vastness. The crowds. The announcements in multiple languages. But he'd studied the layout online, memorized his flight information, arrived 3 hours early as Monica had insisted. When he finally boarded Flight 2187, he felt a surge of pride. He was doing this. Actually doing this. Taking his first step toward the future they'd planned for so long. If only he'd known what was waiting for him on that plane. Kelly Benson hadn't always been this way. There was a time, before the divorce, before the foreclosure notice, before her mother's Alzheimer's diagnosis, when she'd been known for her patience. Her kindness. Her ability to defuse tense situations with passengers. "Nobody handles first-class cabin drama like Kelly," her supervisor had written in her 2015 performance review. "She makes everyone feel like they belong there." That was the irony that would haunt her later. She'd once been celebrated for her inclusivity. But 15 years in the air changes a person. 15 years of entitled passengers demanding special treatment. 15 years of schedule disruptions and holiday shifts. 15 years of watching younger, less experienced flight attendants get promoted while she remained in the same position. Bitterness accumulates like plaque in arteries. Slowly. Imperceptibly. Until one day the flow of compassion is completely blocked. By 2025, Kelly Benson had developed certain preferences in how she managed her flights. Certain passengers received warmer smiles. Certain requests were handled with greater urgency. Certain people were given the benefit of the doubt during boarding confusion. It wasn't conscious, she would later insist. It wasn't deliberate. But patterns don't lie. The Latino family redirected to coach despite their first-class tickets in 2019. The elderly Indian woman whose complaint about a spilled drink was dismissed in 2020. The Muslim passenger asked to change seats for balance purposes in 2022. Small incidents. Easily explained away. Quickly forgotten by everyone except those on the receiving end. And now, on June 19, 2025, Juneteenth, though Kelly hadn't registered the significance of the date, she was preparing to work Flight 2187 from Detroit to Atlanta with a dull headache and a notice from her mother's nursing home about overdue payments. "Just get through this shift," she told herself, applying an extra layer of makeup to hide her exhaustion. Just get through today. She had no idea she was about to become the central character in America's latest racial controversy. No idea that by this time tomorrow, her name would be synonymous with discrimination. No idea that 15 years of service would be reduced to 15 seconds of viral video. No idea that Seat 17C would change everything. Dr. Lena Brooks hadn't planned to be on Flight 2187. Her private jet was undergoing maintenance, an inconvenience that would normally have caused her to reschedule her Atlanta meetings. But the acquisition of Tech Future, a promising black-owned startup she'd been mentoring, couldn't wait. The competing offer from Microsoft would expire in 48 hours. So here she was, flying commercial for the first time in 5 years. The first-class ticket had been the last one available. The flight attendant had seemed surprised when she boarded, as if Lena didn't match her mental image of a first-class passenger despite her Brunello Cucinelli suit and Hermes briefcase. Lena was used to that look. The subtle reassessment. The mental calculations. The adjustment of expectations. At 39, she'd built an empire that few people knew existed. Her investment firm, Phoenix Capital, operated largely behind the scenes, acquiring undervalued companies, installing diverse leadership, then watching the profits multiply. Her personal portfolio included commercial real estate in Houston, tech startups in Austin, and a significant stake in a pharmaceutical company developing treatments for sickle cell anemia. Forbes had profiled her once, calling her the invisible billionaire. She'd corrected them. Her net worth was only $347 million, but embraced the invisible descriptor. Power worked best when people didn't see it coming. Growing up in Houston's Third Ward, Lena had learned early that justice wasn't distributed equally. Her father, a civil rights attorney, had taken cases pro bono for community members facing discrimination. Her mother, a high school principal, had fought tirelessly for resources for her predominantly black student body. Money talks, her father used to say, but wealth commands. Lena had taken that lesson to heart, working her way through Howard University, then Harvard Law, then Wall Street, always with a plan, always with purpose. When she'd left corporate law to start her investment firm, her colleagues thought she was having a midlife crisis. They didn't understand that every move she'd made since age 17 had been building toward this. 17. The same age as the boy who would soon board this flight with dreams of his own. Lena settled into her seat, opened her laptop, and began reviewing the Tech Future acquisition documents. She barely noticed the other passengers boarding until a commotion several rows behind her caught her attention. She turned, observed, and made a decision that would alter multiple lives forever. Some people might call it fate, this confluence of characters on one flight. Monica's sacrifices. Tyrone's ambitions. Kelly's bitterness. Lena's power. But fate implies randomness. And what was about to unfold was anything but random. It was, instead, the inevitable collision of America's most persistent problem with its most potent force. Racism meet wealth. Tyrone Carter stepped onto Flight 2187 with the careful confidence of someone determined not to look out of place. He'd watched YouTube videos on airport etiquette, studied how business travelers carried themselves, practiced the casual efficiency of frequent flyers, boarding pass in hand, carry-on properly sized, movements deliberate but unhurried. What he couldn't practice was how to handle what happened next. The boarding process had gone smoothly. The gate agent had smiled, scanned his ticket, wished him a good flight. The jet bridge had been crowded but manageable. He'd even helped an elderly woman with her bag, earning a grateful nod from another flight attendant. Everything was going according to plan until he reached row 17. Seat A was occupied by a middle-aged white woman already wearing noise-canceling headphones, eyes closed. Seat B remained empty. And Seat C, his assigned spot, should have been waiting for him. Instead, a white man in his 50s sat there, scrolling through his phone. Gray suit. Expensive watch. The casual entitlement of someone used to taking up space. Tyrone double-checked his boarding pass. Definitely 17C. Excuse me, sir, he said politely. I think you might be in my seat. The man barely glanced up. No, I'm not. Tyrone showed him the boarding pass. See? 17C. Now the man looked, not at the boarding pass but at Tyrone himself. A slow, evaluating gaze from shoes to face. There must be some mistake, he said finally. I always book an aisle seat. Maybe there was a system error, Tyrone suggested, still maintaining his politeness despite the discomfort building in his chest. We should probably ask. Is there a problem here? Kelly Benson had appeared beside them, her practiced flight attendant smile not quite reaching her eyes. This young man thinks he has my seat, the man said before Tyrone could speak. Kelly took Tyrone's boarding pass, studied it for a moment, then looked at the man. Mr. Caldwell, may I see your boarding pass as well? The man, Caldwell, produced his phone showing an electronic ticket. Kelly glanced at it, then back at Tyrone's paper boarding pass. A flicker of something crossed her face. Decision. Dismissal. Sir, she said to Caldwell, her voice lowered conspiratorially, there seems to be a duplicate assignment. Let me handle this. Then to Tyrone, we need to move you to another seat. The system sometimes makes these errors. Tyrone frowned. But I checked in yesterday. I selected this seat specifically because it's near the exit row. I get motion sickness sometimes and... We have a seat available in the back, Kelly interrupted, her voice taking on an edge. Row 32 by the restrooms. The back of the plane. The very last row. The least desirable seats on any aircraft. Tyrone felt his face grow warm. He was aware of other passengers watching now. The woman in 17A had removed her headphones. People in nearby rows had paused their pre-flight routines to observe. I don't understand, he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. If there's a duplicate, shouldn't you check who was assigned first? Or maybe Mr. Caldwell could move instead. Caldwell snorted. I'm a Platinum Medallion member, kid. I've flown over 100,000 miles with Delta this year alone. I'm not moving. Kelly's smile had completely vanished now. You need to take the available seat, sir. You're delaying our departure. The emphasis on sir made it sound like an insult. Tyrone felt a familiar sensation, the tightening in his chest that came whenever he encountered these situations. The mental calculation, push back and be labeled difficult or aggressive? Or swallow the injustice and hate yourself later. His mother's voice echoed in his head, pick your battles, baby. Some fights aren't worth the cost. Was this one of those moments? Or was this exactly the kind of situation she'd been preparing him to stand up against? Before he could decide, another passenger spoke up, a white woman in her 30s sitting across the aisle. Excuse me, she said, but I think I just heard you say there's a duplicate seat assignment? Kelly turned, clearly annoyed at the interruption. Yes, ma'am. We're handling it. That's interesting, the woman continued pleasantly, because I'm a software engineer, and modern airline booking systems have redundancy checks specifically to prevent duplicate seat assignments. The only way two people could be assigned the same seat is if someone's boarding pass was issued after another person had already checked in. A murmur rippled through the nearby passengers. Kelly's face tightened. Ma'am, with all due respect, airline systems are complex and... Oh, I know, the woman interrupted, still smiling. I actually consulted on a project for American Airlines last year. Fascinating systems. They log every seat assignment with timestamps. Very easy to check who had the seat first. Tyrone felt a surge of gratitude toward this unexpected ally. But Kelly was already shifting strategies. Regardless of the technical details, she said briskly, we need to resolve this quickly. Mr. Caldwell is a valued frequent flyer, and we have an available seat in row 32. This isn't complicated. And there it was. The real issue laid bare. Not duplicate assignments. Not system errors. Just the clear message, some passengers matter more than others. Tyrone looked at Caldwell, now smugly settling into seat 17C. He looked at Kelly, impatient and dismissive. He looked at the other passengers, some uncomfortable, some indifferent, some deliberately looking away. This moment would define him. Whatever choice he made would follow him long after this flight ended. He thought of the leadership conference waiting in Atlanta. The opportunities it represented. The doors it might open. Would fighting for his assigned seat jeopardize all that? Would creating a scene get him removed from the flight entirely? Would he become another viral video, another black person deemed uncooperative for simply asking to be treated fairly? Fine, he said quietly. I'll move. Kelly's relief was palpable. Thank you for your cooperation. Row 32, last seats on the left. As Tyrone made his way to the back of the plane, he felt the weight of every step. The walk seemed endless, each row a reminder of his forced retreat. By the time he reached row 32, his eyes were burning with unshed tears of humiliation and anger. The seats were exactly as bad as he'd feared. Directly beside the bathroom. Limited recline. The constant sound of flushing and the smell of disinfectant would be his companions for the next 2 hours. He stowed his backpack under the seat in front. His laptop with the presentation he'd been perfecting for weeks now crushed against his feet. A flight attendant, not Kelly, a younger Asian woman, passed by and gave him a sympathetic look. I'm sorry about that, she whispered. It wasn't right. The kindness almost broke him. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. As the safety demonstration began, Tyrone pulled out his phone to text his mother that he'd boarded safely. That's when he noticed something strange. A notification from X, formerly Twitter. You've been mentioned in a post by Atlena Brooks. He didn't recognize the name. Didn't follow anyone by that handle. He opened the app and froze. There was a photo, taken from several rows ahead, showing him standing next to Kelly and Caldwell. The caption read, "Watching in real time as a Delta flight attendant Kelly B. forces a black teenager from his assigned seat, 17C, to the back of the plane to accommodate a white passenger." In 2025. On #Juneteenth. The teen showed his boarding pass. She didn't care. #Delta do better. The post had already been shared over 500 times in the few minutes since it was posted. As Tyrone stared at his phone in disbelief, another notification appeared. Then another. And another. The story was spreading. People were asking his name. Tagging Delta's corporate account. Demanding responses. At Civil Rights Now, this is blatant discrimination. At Delta needs to address this immediately. At Travel Influencer, as a frequent flyer, I'm appalled. This flight attendant needs to be identified and held accountable. At Black Travel Alliance, we've documented 17 similar incidents on major airlines this year alone. This isn't isolated. It's systemic. Tyrone's hands began to shake. He hadn't wanted this. Hadn't asked for this attention. He just wanted to get to Atlanta, attend his conference, make his mother proud. Now he was becoming a hashtag. From the front of the plane he felt someone watching him. He looked up to see a black woman in first class, elegant, composed, observing him with an expression of fierce determination. She nodded once, deliberately, then turned back to her laptop. Atlena Brooks. Had to be. As the plane began to taxi, Tyrone realized that his journey had already veered dramatically off course. Whatever happened in Atlanta now would be overshadowed by what had happened on this plane. The leadership conference seemed suddenly distant, irrelevant compared to the storm gathering around him. His phone continued to buzz with notifications until the flight attendant, the kind one, gently reminded him to switch to airplane mode. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. Tyrone wasn't sure how to answer. Was he okay? Was any of this okay? "I don't know," he admitted. She squeezed his shoulder briefly. "For what it's worth, I saw what happened. It wasn't right." As she moved away to prepare for takeoff, Tyrone stared out the small window at the Detroit runway disappearing beneath them. He thought about texting his mother but decided against it. What would he say? That he'd been humiliated before his trip even began? That he was now at the center of a social media firestorm? That would only worry her. Make her feel helpless. Maybe even make her regret sending him on this trip. No, he would handle this himself. Somehow. The plane climbed higher, leaving Detroit behind. Tyrone closed his eyes, trying to center himself, trying to prepare for whatever awaited him in Atlanta. He had no way of knowing that 30,000 feet below, in the Delta corporate offices, alerts were already blaring. Social media managers were frantically escalating the situation to senior leadership. PR teams were being assembled. He had no way of knowing that Kelly Benson, still serving drinks in the main cabin, was hours away from becoming the most notorious flight attendant in America. He had no way of knowing that Lena Brooks had already made 4 phone calls from the first-class cabin bathroom, to her attorney, to a media contact at CNN, to the NAACP, and to the CEO of a major Delta shareholder. He had no way of knowing that Mr. Caldwell, comfortably settled in seat 17C, Tyrone's seat, was about to become collateral damage in a story much bigger than a disputed airline assignment. All Tyrone knew was that something had shifted. A line had been crossed. And there was no going back. The seatbelt sign dinged off. The flight leveled out. And somewhere over Ohio, as Tyrone Carter sat in the last row of Flight 2187, his life changed forever. Not because of anything he'd done, but because, for once, someone with power had been watching. Lena Brooks hadn't become a multimillionaire by accident. Every move she made was calculated. Every action had purpose. Every intervention was timed for maximum impact. When she boarded Flight 2187 that morning, she hadn't been looking for a cause. She'd been focused on the Tech Future acquisition, a deal that would add another black-owned company to her portfolio and potentially create hundreds of jobs in underserved communities. But the moment she witnessed Kelly Benson marching Tyrone Carter to the back of the plane, something shifted in her priorities. It wasn't just the blatant discrimination that caught her attention. It was the resignation on Tyrone's face. The practiced way he swallowed his dignity. The careful control he maintained even as he was being humiliated. She recognized that expression. Had worn it herself countless times before wealth had armored her against such treatment. From her first-class seat, Lena had a clear view of the entire interaction. She observed Kelly's dismissive tone, noted Caldwell's smug entitlement, registered the uncomfortable silence of surrounding passengers. Most importantly, she saw Tyrone's boarding pass, clearly marked 17C, being ignored. That's when Lena made her decision. While appearing to work on her laptop, she activated her phone's camera and discreetly captured the scene. 3 photos. 12 seconds of video. Enough evidence to prevent any denial later. Then she waited until the confrontation concluded, until Tyrone had been relegated to the back and Kelly had moved on, before making her move. The post to X was just the opening salvo. What the other passengers didn't see was Lena's systematic dismantling of Kelly Benson's career happening in real time from seat 2A. First, she texted her executive assistant, "Need everything on Delta flight attendant Kelly B. Flight 2187 DTW-ATL. Employment history, previous complaints, social media. Priority 1. Then she messaged her legal team, documenting potential civil rights violation on current Delta flight. Prepare for possible action. Target, airline, not individual employee. Next came the media contacts, carefully cultivated relationships with producers at CNN, MSNBC, and several black-owned news outlets. Witnessing discrimination incident on Delta flight right now. Will send footage upon landing. Teen victim, flight attendant perpetrator. Juneteenth angle. Within minutes, her phone lit up with responses. On it, Dr. Brooks. Sending researcher now. CNN interested. Can we get exclusive? All while appearing to simply work on her laptop. By the time the drink service began, Lena had set in motion a machine designed to ensure this incident wouldn't be ignored or forgotten. A machine built over years specifically for moments like this. When Kelly approached her row with the beverage cart, Lena looked up and smiled pleasantly. "Sparkling water, please," she requested, noting the name tag. "Thank you, Kelly." The flight attendant nodded professionally, unaware that the elegant woman in 2A had just initiated the countdown on her career. Lena took the water, then asked casually, "How long have you been with Delta?" 15 years, Kelly replied with practiced pride. "Impressive," Lena said. "You must have seen a lot of changes in the industry during that time." "You have no idea," Kelly sighed, momentarily dropping her professional veneer. "Not all for the better, unfortunately." "How so?" Lena prompted, her tone innocent but her attention razor-sharp. Kelly glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Let's just say the standards aren't what they used to be. For passengers or staff." The coded language wasn't subtle to Lena's trained ear. The implication was clear. Some people didn't belong in certain spaces. "I see," Lena replied, maintaining her pleasant expression. "Well, I appreciate your service." As Kelly moved on to the next row, Lena made another note in her phone. The conversation would be included in her documentation. Meanwhile, her post on X was gaining traction. The hashtag #DeltaDoBetter had begun trending. People were sharing their own stories of discrimination on flights. The airline's social media team had already issued a generic response. "We take these allegations seriously and are looking into the matter. Delta is committed to treating all passengers with dignity and respect." Corporate boilerplate. Meaningless without action. Lena knew the real pressure would come after landing, when the footage was released, when Tyrone's identity became known, when the media machine she'd activated began demanding answers. For now, she had one more task to complete. Midway through the flight, during a period of light turbulence when passengers were required to remain seated, Lena used the opportunity to send a series of messages to key Delta shareholders, people in her network who understood the financial impact of racial controversy. Potential PR crisis developing on Delta Flight 2187. Racial discrimination captured on video. Advise reviewing crisis management protocols before market open tomorrow. The message was clear. This would affect stock prices if mishandled. In the world Lena operated in, money spoke louder than morality. Companies rarely made changes based on what was right, they made changes based on what was profitable. Or more accurately, what threatened their profits. By targeting shareholders, Lena ensured that Delta's response wouldn't be left to mid-level PR managers. This would reach the C-suite within hours. As the plane began its descent into Atlanta, Lena finally allowed herself to look back toward row 32. Tyrone sat alone, staring out the small window, unaware that a stranger had just made his personal humiliation into national news. For a moment, Lena questioned her actions. Had she overstepped? Used this young man's experience for her own agenda? Should she have asked his permission before thrusting him into the spotlight? The doubt lasted only seconds before her resolve returned. Some injustices required exposure. Some moments needed witnesses. Some systems would never change without public pressure. If Tyrone resented her intervention, she would make it up to him. Offer him mentorship, connections, opportunities that would transform this humiliation into advancement. But first, Kelly Benson needed to face consequences. The plane touched down at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport at 11:42 a.m. As passengers prepared to deplane, Lena noticed something unusual: 2 airline representatives in suits waiting at the jet bridge. Word had traveled faster than she expected. She gathered her belongings unhurriedly, watching as Kelly completed her final duties, still unaware of what awaited her. When the door opened and passengers began to exit, Lena remained in her seat, observing. The suited representatives boarded immediately, bypassing the deplaning passengers. They approached Kelly directly, their expressions grave. "Miss Benson? We need you to come with us right away." Kelly's confusion was evident. "What's this about?" "I have a connecting flight to prepare for." "That flight has been reassigned. Please come with us now." The other flight attendants exchanged glances. Passengers slowed their exit, sensing drama. Phones emerged, recording the scene. As Kelly was escorted off the aircraft, her face flushed with embarrassment and confusion, Lena finally stood to leave. Her work on this plane was done. But the real impact was just beginning. In the terminal, chaos awaited. News crews had already assembled near the gate. Social media managers from Delta were huddled in urgent conversation. Security personnel created a perimeter, trying to maintain order. And standing in the middle of it all, looking overwhelmed and disoriented, was Tyrone Carter. Cameras turned toward him as he emerged from the jet bridge. Reporters called his name. Someone had already identified him from the social media posts. Microphones thrust in his direction. Questions shouted from all sides. "Tyrone, how do you feel about being forced to the back of the plane? Did the flight attendant make any racial comments? Will you be filing a lawsuit against Delta? What was going through your mind during the incident?" The poor kid looked like a deer in headlights. This wasn't what he had come to Atlanta for. This wasn't part of his carefully planned future. Lena moved swiftly, cutting through the crowd with the authority of someone used to commanding rooms. "Mr. Carter will not be making any statements at this time," she announced, positioning herself between Tyrone and the cameras. "His legal representation will issue a formal response after consultation." The reporters pivoted immediately. "Are you his attorney? Can you confirm your identity? What are you seeking from Delta?" Lena smiled, the practiced, camera-ready smile she'd perfected for business journals and financial news segments. "Dr. Lena Brooks, CEO of Phoenix Capital. I witnessed the incident and will be supporting Mr. Carter through this process. That's all for now." The mention of her name changed the energy instantly. Business reporters recognized her. Financial journalists straightened. Even the general news crews sensed they were dealing with someone significant. Lena Brooks wasn't just any witness. She was a power player. A newsmaker in her own right. And she had just aligned herself with Tyrone Carter. As she guided the stunned teenager away from the media frenzy, she spoke quietly. "I apologize for involving you in this without your consent. But what happened on that plane was wrong and it needs to be addressed." Tyrone found his voice finally. "Who are you? Why are you helping me?" "Someone who's been where you are," Lena replied. "And who now has the resources to do something about it." She led him to a private airport lounge, her membership granting them immediate access and escape from the cameras. Once inside, she explained everything. The photos she'd taken. The posts she'd made. The machine she'd activated. "This can stop right now if you want," she assured him. "I can issue a statement saying you wish for privacy. We can let Delta handle this internally. Your name can stay out of the headlines." Tyrone sat silently, processing. The leadership conference he'd traveled for was scheduled to begin in 3 hours. His mother had sacrificed so much to get him here. His future plans depended on the connections he would make. And now this stranger, this wealthy, powerful stranger, had turned his personal humiliation into breaking news. "Why did you do this?" he asked finally. "Really? What do you get out of it?" The question was perceptive. Most adults wouldn't have had the courage to ask so directly. Lena considered her answer carefully. 22 years ago I was you," she said finally. 17. Ambitious. Determined to succeed despite the obstacles. And I was humiliated by someone with power who thought I didn't belong in a space they controlled. She paused, the memory still sharp despite the decades. The difference is no one with influence witnessed it. No one with resources stood up for me. I promised myself that if I ever gained the power to change these situations, I would use it. Tyrone studied her, weighing her sincerity. The conference I'm here for, it starts in a few hours. This was supposed to be my big opportunity. Lena nodded. It still can be. Or I can offer you something potentially more valuable. What's that? Mentorship. Connections. A different kind of education than what that conference provides. She handed him her business card. Simple, elegant, with just her name and contact information. Whatever you decide about how to handle this situation, this offer stands independently. Your dignity is not a transaction. Before Tyrone could respond, both their phones buzzed simultaneously. Delta had issued an official statement. We are aware of a situation on Flight 2187 from Detroit to Atlanta involving allegations of discriminatory treatment. The employee in question has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Delta has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind, and we are taking this matter extremely seriously. Too little too late. The damage was done. And as Tyrone and Lena sat in that airport lounge, watching the story explode across social media and news outlets, neither of them realized that the most shocking developments were yet to come. Because Kelly Benson wasn't going down without a fight. And when cornered, people with 15 years of airline secrets can become very dangerous indeed. The scene at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport transformed from routine arrival to media circus in less than 30 minutes. By noon, all major networks had crews positioned at the terminal. Social media teams from competing airlines watched the disaster unfold with a mixture of horror and relief that it wasn't happening to them. Delta executives in Atlanta headquarters abandoned scheduled meetings for emergency crisis management sessions. All because of Seat 17C. Kelly Benson sat in a sterile conference room in the airport's administrative section, still wearing her flight attendant uniform, still not fully comprehending how quickly her world had collapsed. Across from her sat Marjorie Winters, Delta's regional director of flight operations, and Thomas Reeves from Human Resources. Their expressions were grim. I don't understand, Kelly repeated for the third time. This is about the seating issue? We have those all the time. The system duplicates assignments sometimes. Marjorie slid her tablet across the table, displaying the viral social media posts. This isn't about a duplicate assignment, Kelly. This is about how you handled it. Kelly scanned the posts, her face draining of color as she realized the scale of the situation. Hundreds of thousands of shares. Millions of views. Her name and partial photo circulating worldwide. This is ridiculous, she protested, voice rising. I was following protocol for elite status passengers. Mr. Caldwell is platinum medallion. The other passenger was a 17-year-old black student traveling to a leadership conference, Thomas interrupted, who had a valid boarding pass for seat 17C, which our system confirms was assigned to him 24 hours before Mr. Caldwell's check-in. Kelly fell silent, the implication sinking in. There was no duplicate assignment, was there? Marjorie asked quietly. Kelly looked away. I thought. The truth, Kelly. Now. After 15 years of service, 15 years of evaluations and commendations and holiday shifts missed with family, Kelly Benson broke. Fine. Caldwell is a regular on my routes. He always wants an aisle seat. He gets difficult when he doesn't get his way. I was trying to avoid a scene. By creating a worse one, Thomas noted, making a notation in his file. How was I supposed to know someone would film it? How was I supposed to know it would become this? She gestured at the tablet where the hashtag #FireKellyB was now trending. Marjorie's expression hardened. That's not the point, Kelly. The point is that you discriminated against a passenger based on your personal preference for another passenger. It wasn't about race. Kelly insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. It was about status. Airline status. And yet you sent a black teenager to the back of the plane on Juneteenth, Thomas said flatly, while accommodating a white passenger who had no legitimate claim to that seat. When framed that way, even Kelly couldn't deny how it looked. What happens now? She asked, her voice small. Marjorie and Thomas exchanged glances. You're suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending a full investigation, Marjorie stated. You'll surrender your credentials before leaving today. The investigation will include a review of past passenger complaints to determine if this was an isolated incident. Kelly's stomach dropped. She knew what they would find. The Latino family in 2019. The elderly Indian woman in 2020. The Muslim passenger in 2022. Small incidents. Easily explained individually. Damning when viewed collectively. My mother's care facility, the payments? I can't lose this job, she whispered. For a moment, Thomas's professional demeanor softened. You should have thought about that before. As Kelly sat shell-shocked in that conference room, the story continued to unfold across the airport and beyond. In the Delta Sky Club lounge, Tyrone Carter stared at his phone in disbelief. His name was everywhere. Hashtag justice for Tyrone. Hashtag Seatgate. Hashtag Delta discrimination. His social media followers had jumped from 230 to over 15,000 in an hour. Interview requests flooded his DMs from journalists, podcasters, talk shows. This is insane, he murmured, looking up at Lena Brooks, who sat calmly across from him. I didn't ask for any of this. Few do, she replied. But now you have a choice about how to use it. Tyrone's phone rang, his mother calling for the 5th time. He had texted her briefly that there had been an incident on the plane but that he was safe. Clearly she had seen the news. He answered, bracing himself. Tyrone James Carter, what in God's name is happening? Monica's voice was tight with worry. You're all over the news. People are calling our house. Channel 7 has a van parked outside. Mom, I'm okay, he assured her. It's complicated. But I'm safe. They're saying you were discriminated against? Forced to move seats because you're black. Tyrone hesitated. Yeah, that's what happened. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Monica Carter had prepared her son for this reality his entire life, had warned him, coached him, tried to protect him. And still it had found him. Who's this woman they're saying is helping you? Dr. Brooks? Tyrone glanced at Lena, who was discreetly giving him privacy while remaining nearby. She witnessed what happened. She's offering to help navigate this situation. Another pause. Can I speak with her? Tyrone handed his phone to Lena, who took it without hesitation. Miss Carter? Lena Brooks. I want to assure you that your son is being well taken care of. What followed was a 20-minute conversation that Tyrone could only hear one side of. Lena explained her background, her resources, her intentions. She answered Monica's questions directly and honestly. She made no promises except one. Your son's dignity and future are my priority. Nothing will happen without his consent and your approval. By the end, something had shifted. When Lena handed the phone back to Tyrone, his mother's tone had changed. Listen to me carefully, baby, Monica said. This Dr. Brooks, she seems genuine. But remember what I always told you. Trust but verify, Tyrone recited. Exactly. Now about this conference. I know. I should probably cancel. Head back home. Monica was quiet for a moment. No. You go to that conference. You do exactly what you came to Atlanta to do. Don't let them take that from you too. Tyrone felt tears threatening. His mother's strength had always been his foundation. What about all this? He asked, gesturing at his phone though she couldn't see it. That'll be waiting when you're done. The vultures always circle, but they can wait to feed. After promising to call her that evening with updates, Tyrone ended the call and looked at Lena. I want to attend my conference, he said firmly. That's why I came here. Lena nodded, respect evident in her expression. Then that's what you'll do. I'll arrange transportation and security if needed. And after? After we can discuss next steps. But your mother is right. Don't let this derail what you came here to accomplish. As Lena made arrangements, Tyrone checked the conference schedule on his phone. The opening session began at 3 p.m. He still had time to make it. But first, he needed to understand exactly what was happening with the flight attendant who had humiliated him. Outside the administrative offices, a small crowd of Delta employees had gathered. Word had spread quickly through airport staff. One of their own was in trouble. Big trouble. Among them stood Aisha Patel, the flight attendant who had shown Tyrone kindness after he was relocated to the back of the plane. Is it true? Asked a baggage handler. Kelly really forced a kid to move because he was black? Aisha hesitated. Speaking out could jeopardize her own position. Flight crews were tight-knit, protective of each other. But she had witnessed the entire incident. Yes, she said finally. I saw it happen. The boy had the correct seat assignment. Kelly moved him anyway. Damn, muttered another employee. She's done. It's not the first time, Aisha added quietly. Heads turned toward her. What do you mean? Someone asked. Aisha took a deep breath. I've flown with Kelly for 3 years. I've seen her do similar things before. Not always this obvious, but patterns, you know? The group fell silent, processing this information. Some looked uncomfortable, perhaps recognizing similar behaviors they had witnessed or even participated in. They're going to make an example of her, predicted a senior gate agent. Corporate will throw her under the bus to protect the brand. Is that wrong? Challenged Aisha. What she did was discriminatory. Plain and simple. Before anyone could respond, the door to the administrative offices opened. Kelly emerged, escorted by security, her face blotchy from crying, her Delta wings and ID badge conspicuously absent from her uniform. The gathered employees parted silently, creating a path. Some avoided eye contact. Others stared openly, curiosity and judgment mingled in their expressions. Kelly stopped when she saw them, momentarily frozen by the public nature of her humiliation. Then, spotting Aisha, her expression hardened. "You," she said, voice low but intense. "You were there. You could have backed me up." Aisha stood her ground. "No, Kelly. What you did was wrong. We're supposed to support each other." Kelly hissed. 15 years I've given this company. 15 years. And in 15 seconds you showed who you really are," Aisha replied steadily. Security gently but firmly guided Kelly away from the confrontation. As she was led toward the exit, she called over her shoulder. "They'll do the same to any of you. One mistake, one passenger with a camera, and your career is over too." The employees watched her go, a mixture of emotions on their faces. Fear, sympathy, relief that it wasn't them, concern that it could be someday. What none of them knew was that a CNN producer had captured the entire exchange on a smartphone. By evening, Kelly's exit would be featured on national news. The disgraced flight attendant escorted from the premises, warning her colleagues about the precariousness of their own positions. It would not generate the sympathy she hoped for. Delta's PR team worked frantically throughout the afternoon. Statements were drafted, revised, approved, and released in rapid succession. 2:15 p.m. Delta is aware of an incident on Flight 2187. We take all allegations of discrimination seriously and are investigating the matter. 3:42 p.m. The employee involved has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Delta has zero tolerance for discrimination. 5:07 p.m. After preliminary investigation, the employee in question has been terminated, effective immediately. We apologize to the passenger affected and are taking steps to ensure such incidents do not occur in the future. 7:23 p.m. Delta CEO Richard Anderson has personally reached out to the family of Tyrone Carter to express our deepest apologies. We are committed to making this right and to learning from this incident. Each statement more definitive than the last. Each one trying to get ahead of a story that was already beyond their control. Because by late afternoon, the narrative had expanded beyond Kelly Benson and Tyrone Carter. It had become a referendum on air travel, on customer service, on corporate America's handling of racial incidents, and on the power of wealth to demand accountability. At precisely 3 p.m., as Delta executives huddled in crisis meetings, Tyrone Carter walked into the Atlanta Convention Center for the opening session of the Youth Business Leadership Conference. He wore the same clothes he'd carefully selected that morning, khakis, dress shirt, his grandfather's tie. But he carried himself differently now. The eyes that followed him through the registration area weren't seeing just another participant. They were seeing the young man from the news. The one who stood his ground. The one with Dr. Lena Brooks in his corner. Several conference organizers approached him immediately. "Mr. Carter, we've been trying to reach you," said a woman with a staff badge. "Given the circumstances, we completely understand if you need to withdraw from the program." Tyrone straightened his shoulders. "Why would I withdraw?" The woman blinked, caught off guard. "Well, with everything that's happening, the media attention, we thought you might prefer some privacy." "I came here to learn about business leadership," Tyrone said firmly. "That's exactly what I intend to do." The woman nodded, clearly impressed by his composure. "Of course. Please let us know if you need anything at all." As Tyrone moved toward the main hall, other participants whispered and pointed. Some approached to express support. Others kept their distance, unsure how to engage with someone suddenly thrust into the spotlight. He found his assigned seat just as the keynote speaker was being introduced, a successful tech entrepreneur known for creating opportunities for underrepresented groups in the industry. The speaker stepped to the podium, surveyed the room, then departed from his prepared remarks. "Before I begin, I want to acknowledge something. We have with us today a young man who has already demonstrated more courage and dignity than many business leaders twice his age. Heads turned toward Tyrone, who felt his face grow warm. "Tyrone Carter, what happened to you today was unacceptable. But how you've handled it is remarkable. That's the kind of composure that defines true leadership." Applause rippled through the room. Tyrone nodded in acknowledgement, uncomfortable with the attention but determined not to show it. "Now," the speaker continued, "today's session is about recognizing opportunity in unexpected places. Sometimes, those opportunities come disguised as obstacles. Sometimes they come in the form of seat 17C. More applause. More eyes on Tyrone. As the presentation began, Tyrone tried to focus on the content rather than the surreal nature of his situation. He had come to Atlanta to learn how to become a business leader. Instead, he was becoming a symbol. The question was, a symbol of what? Victimhood? Resilience? The ongoing struggle for dignity in everyday spaces? Or something else entirely, something connected to the elegant, powerful woman who had appointed herself his advocate? As the keynote address continued, Tyrone's phone buzzed with a text from Lena Brooks. "CNN wants an exclusive interview. Tomorrow morning. Your choice. Whatever you decide, I'll support." Tyrone stared at the message, the weight of decision pressing on him. His mother had sacrificed so much to get him here. To give him opportunities. To prepare him for a world that wouldn't always treat him fairly. Now that world was watching. Waiting to see what he would do next. He typed his response carefully. "I'll do it. But on one condition, I want to tell the whole story. Not just what happened on the plane. But why it matters." Lena's reply came seconds later. "Exactly what I hoped you'd say." By Tuesday morning, what had begun as a viral social media moment had evolved into a full-blown corporate crisis for Delta Airlines. The company's stock had dropped 3.7% at market open. Boycott threats circulated online. Competitors subtly positioned themselves as more inclusive alternatives. Civil rights organizations demanded meetings with Delta leadership. And at the center of it all remained three people: Tyrone Carter, the student whose dignity had been violated; Lena Brooks, the wealthy executive who had exposed the incident; and Kelly Benson, the now unemployed flight attendant whose actions had ignited the firestorm. But as media attention intensified, the story began to expand beyond its original parameters. Journalists, sensing a bigger narrative, started digging deeper. The first breakthrough came from an unlikely source: Delta's own records. Melissa Zhao, an investigative reporter for The Washington Post, had been covering airline industry issues for over a decade. When the Tyrone Carter story broke, she immediately recognized its potential significance beyond a single incident of discrimination. "This isn't just about one flight attendant and one passenger," she told her editor. "This is about systemic issues in how airlines handle these situations." With that angle approved, Melissa began working her sources within Delta. Flight attendants, gate agents, HR personnel who had witnessed similar incidents but lacked the platform to address them. By Tuesday afternoon, she had obtained something explosive: Kelly Benson's personnel file. The document, leaked by someone inside Delta's HR department, revealed a pattern that the airline had systematically ignored for years. 2019. Written warning for customer service issues, involving a Latino family reassigned from first class. 2020. Customer complaint from an elderly Indian woman dismissed as miscommunication. 2022. Internal review after a Muslim passenger reported feeling discriminated against. No action taken. Each incident, viewed in isolation, had been deemed insufficient for termination. Each had been handled quietly with minimal documentation. Each had been effectively buried. Until now. Melissa's story, published Tuesday evening under the headline, "Pattern of Prejudice." Delta's years-long failure to address flight attendants' discriminatory behavior transformed the narrative overnight. This was no longer about a single bad employee. This was about corporate complicity. Delta's PR team, already overwhelmed, found themselves facing an entirely new crisis. Their carefully crafted statements about zero tolerance and immediate action now rang hollow against evidence that they had tolerated similar behavior for years. The company hastily announced an independent review of all discrimination complaints from the past 5 years. But the damage was done. The question had shifted from "Why did Kelly Benson discriminate against Tyrone Carter?" to "Why did Delta enable Kelly Benson for so long?" In her Tampa suburb, Kelly Benson sat in stunned silence as her past professional sins were exposed on national television. The modest home she'd worked so hard to maintain now felt like a prison. Reporters camped outside. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages: Some supportive, many hateful. "This isn't fair," she whispered to her sister on the phone. "They're making me into a monster." "Kelly," her sister replied gently, "the records speak for themselves. This wasn't one mistake. This was a pattern. I was just doing my job. Prioritizing our premium customers. By consistently deprioritizing passengers of color?" Kelly had no answer for that. The evidence, laid bare in black and white, forced a confrontation with her own behavior that she had avoided for years. But as the walls closed in around her, Kelly's self-reflection gave way to something darker: resentment. If she was going down, she wouldn't go alone. With trembling hands, she opened her personal email and began composing a message to several news outlets. "I was not the only Delta employee engaging in these practices. I was trained to prioritize certain passengers over others. I have documentation proving systematic discrimination was encouraged by management." She attached several training documents, emails from supervisors and internal memos, material she had saved over the years as personal insurance, never imagining she would actually use it. Kelly Benson was about to transform from villain to whistleblower. And Delta's crisis was about to get much, much worse. While Kelly plotted her counterattack, Tyrone Carter prepared for his CNN interview. He sat in a hotel suite provided by the network, reviewing talking points with Lena Brooks and a media coach she had arranged. His mother Monica had flown in that morning, her first time on a plane in over a decade, and sat nearby, a protective presence. "Remember," the coach advised, "you control this narrative. Don't let them push you into saying anything you're not comfortable with." Tyrone nodded, adjusting his tie, a new one, purchased by Lena to replace his grandfather's worn accessory. "What if they ask about a lawsuit?" he asked. "Everyone keeps talking about how much money I could get from Delta." Lena and Monica exchanged glances. "That's your decision," Lena said carefully. "My legal team believes you have a strong case, especially with the new revelations about Kelly's history. But pursuing legal action comes with costs beyond money." "Like what?" Tyrone asked. "Time. Energy. Privacy," Monica interjected. "They'll dig into our lives, baby. Try to find anything to discredit you." "Your mother's right," Lena confirmed. "Litigation is a marathon, not a sprint. And corporations have resources to drag it out for years." Tyrone considered this. "So what's the alternative?" Lena leaned forward. "Impact. Using this moment to create actual change in how airlines, not just Delta, handle these situations. Policy changes. Training improvements. Accountability measures." "And how do we do that without a lawsuit?" Monica asked skeptically. "Leverage," Lena replied simply. "Right now, Tyrone has the world's attention. That's power. Sometimes more effective than legal action." The media coach checked her watch. "We should wrap up. Interview starts in 30 minutes. As the adults gathered their materials, Tyrone remained seated, deep in thought. The past 24 hours had been a crash course in adult complexities, corporate politics, media manipulation, strategic advocacy. He had come to Atlanta to learn about business leadership. Instead, he was learning about power, how it worked, how it failed, how it could be redirected. "I've made my decision," he announced suddenly. 3 pairs of eyes turned toward him. "I don't want money from Delta. I want change." Across town in Delta's corporate headquarters, a different kind of decision was being made. CEO Richard Anderson sat at the head of a conference table surrounded by executives, lawyers, and PR specialists. The mood was grim. "The Washington Post story is just the beginning," warned the head of communications. "We've received inquiries from 63 other outlets requesting comment on Kelly Benson's history with the company. And now this," added the legal counsel, sliding a tablet across the table. "Benson is threatening to go public with allegations that her behavior was part of a broader corporate culture." Anderson scanned the email, his expression darkening. "Is there any truth to this? Were other employees instructed to prioritize premium passengers in discriminatory ways?" Uncomfortable silence filled the room. "Not explicitly," the VP of Customer Experience finally offered. "But our training does emphasize special attention for medallion members. And our metrics reward employees who generate positive feedback from high-value customers. Which creates implicit pressure to prioritize certain passengers over others," concluded Anderson. "Even when it means violating our non-discrimination policies." More silence. "Options," Anderson demanded. The crisis management team presented 3 scenarios. Fight. Deny systemic issues. Portray Kelly as a rogue employee. Challenge any lawsuits aggressively. Settle. Offer Tyrone Carter a substantial settlement with non-disclosure agreement. Issue public apology. Implement minimal policy changes. Transform. Acknowledge systemic problems. Commit to comprehensive review and overhaul of training, policies, and metrics. Engage with civil rights organizations on long-term solutions. Costs. Anderson asked. The CFO grimaced. Option 1 risks prolonged negative publicity and potential class action exposure. Estimated impact, $70 to $120 million over 3 years. Option 2, immediate settlement of $2 to $5 million to Carter, plus approximately $30 million for policy adjustments and PR recovery. Option 3, comprehensive overhaul estimated at $50 to $75 million upfront, but potentially long-term brand enhancement and customer loyalty benefits that could offset costs within 5 years. Anderson studied the projections, then looked around the table. Recommendations. The room divided predictably. Legal and finance favored option 2, settle quickly, minimize exposure. Marketing and PR pushed for option 3, transform the crisis into an opportunity for brand leadership. As the debate intensified, Anderson's assistant entered with an urgent message. Sir, CNN is about to air an exclusive interview with Tyrone Carter. They're promoting it as revelatory. The meeting paused as an assistant turned on the wall-mounted television. The familiar CNN studio appeared, with Anderson Cooper sitting across from Tyrone Carter. Beside him sat Dr. Lena Brooks, poised and professional in a tailored suit. The Delta executives watched in tense silence as Cooper began. Tyrone, you've been at the center of a national conversation about discrimination in air travel. You could potentially sue Delta Airlines for millions. Yet I understand you've made a different decision. Can you tell us about that? Tyrone, looking remarkably composed for a 17-year-old under such pressure, nodded. I don't want money from Delta, he said clearly. What happened to me happens to people of color every day in ways big and small. Most don't have someone like Dr. Brooks to advocate for them. Most don't get justice. So what do you want? Cooper pressed. Systemic change, Tyrone replied. I want Delta, and every airline, to examine how they train their staff, how they measure success, how they handle complaints from passengers of color. Cooper turned to Lena. Dr. Brooks, you've been supporting Tyrone through this. As a successful business leader yourself, what do you think airlines should do differently? Lena smiled, the same calculated smile she used in boardrooms when preparing to close a deal. It's quite simple, Anderson. Airlines need to recognize that diversity and inclusion aren't just moral imperatives, they're business imperatives. Passengers of color represent trillions in spending power. Companies that consistently disrespect us will ultimately lose market share. She paused, then delivered the line that would send shockwaves through Delta's boardroom. That's why I'm announcing today the formation of the Air Travel Equity Initiative, with initial funding of $50 million from Phoenix Capital. We'll be monitoring airlines' handling of discrimination complaints, publishing quarterly report cards, and working with carriers willing to implement meaningful changes. In the Delta conference room, stunned silence fell. Lena Brooks hadn't just exposed one incident. She had created an accountability mechanism with real financial teeth. And she had just transformed Tyrone Carter from victim to advocate. C.O. Anderson turned off the television and looked around the table. I believe, he said quietly, our decision just got made for us. Option 3 it would be. The Youth Business Leadership Conference concluded on Thursday afternoon with a ceremony recognizing outstanding participants. Among those called to the stage was Tyrone Carter, who received special commendation not for his viral moment, but for the business proposal he had developed during the program's intensive workshops. Tyrone's concept for a tech training initiative in underserved communities demonstrates exceptional understanding of both market needs and social impact, announced the program director. His ability to create a viable business model while addressing systemic inequities shows precisely the kind of leadership this program aims to foster. As applause filled the convention center ballroom, Tyrone accepted the certificate with mixed emotions. Pride in his accomplishment, gratitude for the recognition, but also a nagging uncertainty about whether he had earned this moment on his own merits or because of his sudden notoriety. That question had shadowed him throughout the conference. When other participants sought him out, was it because they valued his ideas or because they wanted proximity to the week's biggest news story? When mentors offered their business cards, was it genuine interest in his potential or opportunistic association with a trending name? These thoughts followed him back to his hotel room, where he found his mother organizing their belongings for tomorrow's return flight to Detroit. There's my superstar, Monica beamed, pulling him into a hug. I knew you'd show them what you're made of. Tyrone set his certificate on the desk. Did I though? Or did they just give me special treatment because of what happened? Monica's expression softened. She sat on the edge of the bed, patting the space beside her. Tyrone joined her, suddenly feeling much younger than his 17 years. Let me tell you something about recognition in this world, she said, her voice taking on the gentle firmness he'd known all his life. People who look like us always question whether we've earned it. Always wonder if it's charity or politics or guilt. That doubt, it can eat you alive if you let it. But how do I know? Tyrone pressed. How can I be sure I deserve that award? You can't, Monica replied simply. Not with absolute certainty. But ask yourself this, did you do the work? Did you put in the effort? Did you bring your best ideas forward? Tyrone nodded slowly. Then claim your success, she continued. Own it completely. Because I promise you one thing, if you hadn't deserved it, there are plenty of people who would have been quick to say so. She squeezed his hand. The world doesn't give black excellence the benefit of the doubt, so we have to give it to ourselves. The wisdom of her words settled over him. His mother had always been his most important teacher, preparing him for a world that would scrutinize his achievements while dismissing his struggles. There's something else bothering you, Monica observed. What is it? Tyrone hesitated, then reached for his phone. He opened his email to show her the message that had arrived during the closing ceremony. From Dr. Lena Brooks, subject, next steps. Tyrone. Congratulations on completing the leadership program. I've been following your progress from afar and am impressed by what I've heard from the program directors. As discussed, the offer of mentorship remains open. Additionally, I'd like to propose something more concrete. A paid internship at Phoenix Capital this summer, working directly with our community investment division. This would provide practical experience to complement your theoretical knowledge, plus connections that could prove valuable for college applications and beyond. Your mother is welcome to relocate temporarily to Houston at our expense, or we can arrange secure housing for you if she prefers to remain in Detroit. Please consider this opportunity carefully. While your recent experience has opened this door, it will be your talent and work ethic that determine what lies beyond it. Regards, Lena. Monica read the email twice, her expression unreadable. What do you think? Tyrone asked finally. I think, Monica said carefully, that opportunities like this don't come along often for kids from our neighborhood. But is it charity? Is she just feeling guilty about putting me in the spotlight without asking? Monica shook her head. Dr. Brooks doesn't strike me as someone who acts from guilt. She's a businesswoman. She sees potential in you, potential that could benefit her company. So you think I should accept? I think, Monica replied, that you should make this decision based on what you want for your future, not on how the opportunity came to you. Tyrone fell silent, considering. The internship would provide experience no classroom could match. Connections no Detroit networking event could offer. A pathway to possibilities he had only dreamed about. But it would also mean leaving behind the familiar. Stepping into a world where he might always wonder if he truly belonged. What about you? He asked finally. Would you really move to Houston for the summer? Monica smiled. Baby, I would move to the moon if it meant giving you a better shot at your dreams. Tyrone hugged her tightly, overwhelmed by the sacrifices she had always been willing to make for him. I need to think about it, he said. Can I let her know after we get home? Of course. This isn't a decision to rush. As they finished packing, Tyrone's phone buzzed with notifications. The media cycle had moved on somewhat, but his name still appeared regularly in discussions about racial discrimination in customer service. Hashtags like #FlyingWhileBlack and #SeatJustice continued to trend. He had declined most interview requests after the CNN appearance, preferring to focus on the leadership program. But the requests kept coming. Talk shows, podcasts, documentary filmmakers all wanting to feature his story. Do you think it'll ever go back to normal? He asked his mother. Will I ever just be Tyrone again, not that kid from the Delta flight? Monica considered the question thoughtfully. You'll always be Tyrone to me, to your friends, to the people who knew you before. But yes, for a while at least, this incident will be part of how the world sees you. She sat beside him again. The question is, how will you use that visibility? Will you let it define you? Or will you define it? Tyrone nodded slowly, understanding the profound choice before him. He could retreat from the spotlight, focus solely on his education and career goals. Or he could embrace this unexpected platform to advocate for the changes he wanted to see. I think, he said finally, I want to do both. I want to build my future. But I also want to make sure what happened to me doesn't keep happening to others. Monica smiled with pride. That sounds like my son. As evening fell over Atlanta, Tyrone stood at the hotel window, looking out at the city lights. 3 days ago, he had arrived as an anonymous teenager with dreams of business success. He would leave as something else entirely, a reluctant symbol, perhaps, but also a young man with a clearer understanding of his own power. His phone buzzed again. A text from Lena Brooks. Delta CEO has requested a meeting with us tomorrow before your flight. Your choice. No pressure either way. Tyrone showed the message to his mother. What do you think they want? He asked. To make this go away, Monica replied without hesitation. Question is, what do you want? Tyrone thought about it, then typed his response. I'll meet with them. But I have conditions. The conference room on the executive floor of Delta's Atlanta headquarters felt worlds away from the cramped airplane seat where this story had begun. Plush chairs surrounded a polished table. Fresh flowers adorned the center. Large windows offered panoramic views of the airfield below, where planes took off and landed in a carefully choreographed dance of commerce and connection. At one end of the table sat CEO Richard Anderson, flanked by the company's general counsel and chief diversity officer, a position created just 48 hours earlier. At the other end sat Tyrone Carter, with his mother Monica beside him and Dr. Lena Brooks across from them. No lawyers. No media. Just 6 people trying to resolve a situation that had spiraled far beyond a disputed seat assignment. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Anderson began, his tone carefully calibrated to convey sincerity without desperation. What happened on that flight was unacceptable, and on behalf of Delta, I want to personally apologize. Tyrone nodded, maintaining the composed demeanor that had impressed millions during his CNN interview. I appreciate that, he said. But I'm more interested in what happens next. Anderson smiled tightly. That's precisely why we wanted this meeting. We've developed a comprehensive action plan to address the issues your experience has highlighted. The Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Renee Washington, opened a folder and outlined Delta's proposed changes. Mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff. Revision of performance metrics to eliminate incentives that could encourage discriminatory behavior. Creation of a passenger advocacy office to handle discrimination complaints. Regular audit of seat reassignment patterns to identify potential bias. Partnership with civil rights organizations to develop industry-wide standards. Additionally, Anderson added, we would like to offer you a private settlement as compensation for your experience. He slid a document across the table. The figure on the bottom line contained more zeros than Tyrone had ever seen attached to his name. Monica inhaled sharply. Lena's expression remained neutral. Tyrone didn't even touch the paper. With all due respect, Mr. Anderson, I told CNN I wasn't interested in money from Delta. I meant it. Anderson looked genuinely surprised. Then what are you seeking from this meeting? Accountability, Tyrone replied. Not just for what happened to me but for the pattern that made it possible. He reached into his backpack and removed a folder of his own, containing printouts of the Washington Post exposé on Kelly Benson's history, internal Delta documents that had been leaked to the media, and statistics on discrimination complaints across the airline industry. Your action plan addresses the future, Tyrone continued. But it doesn't acknowledge the past. How many other Kelly Bensons have been protected by Delta over the years? How many complaints were dismissed or buried? The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Those are complex questions, the general counsel interjected. Many involving confidential personnel matters. They're actually simple questions, Lena Brooks countered, speaking for the first time. And the answers would be illuminating for your shareholders. The implied threat hung in the air. As a successful investor with connections throughout the business world, Lena had the power to make those questions impossible to ignore. Anderson studied the teenager across from him with new respect. He had expected demands for compensation, public apologies, perhaps special treatment. Instead, Tyrone Carter was pushing for structural accountability, the one thing corporations resisted most fiercely. What exactly are you proposing? Anderson asked finally. Transparency, Tyrone replied. A full, independent audit of discrimination complaints received by Delta over the past decade. Public disclosure of how they were handled. And most importantly, acknowledgement of the systemic failures that allowed someone like Kelly Benson to continue her behavior for years. The room fell silent as the executives absorbed the magnitude of this request. Such transparency would be unprecedented in the airline industry, or any industry for that matter. That would expose Delta to significant liability, the General Counsel warned. It would also position you as leaders in corporate accountability, Monica pointed out. Sometimes doing the right thing is also the smart business move. Anderson leaned back, weighing his options. The settlement offer, substantial as it was, would have been simpler, cleaner. The traditional way of making problems disappear. But this wasn't a traditional situation. And Tyrone Carter wasn't a traditional adversary. If we were to consider something along these lines, Anderson said carefully, we would need certain assurances about how the information would be used. Of course, Lena replied smoothly. We're not interested in destroying Delta. We're interested in transforming it, and by extension the industry. As the negotiation continued, Tyrone observed the power dynamics at play. The CEO of a major corporation, the wealthy investor, the attorneys all engaged in a delicate dance of interests and leverage. And somehow, improbably, his voice mattered in this room. All because he had stood up for his assigned seat. All because someone with power had been watching. All because his mother had raised him to know his worth. The final agreement, reached after 2 hours of discussion, would reshape not just Delta's policies but Tyrone's future. The airline would commit to unprecedented transparency. The Air Travel Equity Initiative would provide ongoing oversight. And Tyrone would join the initiative as a youth advisor while completing his internship at Phoenix Capital. As they prepared to leave the meeting, Anderson asked one final question. I'm curious, Tyrone. What made you decide to take this approach rather than pursuing a lawsuit? Tyrone considered his answer carefully. Money compensates individuals, he said finally. But accountability changes systems. And systems affect everyone. Anderson nodded slowly, recognizing wisdom beyond the young man's years. Outside the conference room as they waited for the elevator, Monica hugged her son tightly. Your grandfather would be so proud, she whispered. So proud. Tyrone smiled, thinking of the tie he'd carefully packed away, the one connection to a man who had fought his own battles in a different era. Do you think this will really change anything? He asked Lena as they descended toward the lobby. Change is never guaranteed, she replied. But it's always possible. Especially when you have the right leverage at the right moment. As they exited the building into the bright Atlanta sunshine, Tyrone's phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking. Former Delta flight attendant Kelly Benson releases documents alleging systematic discrimination practices. The final twist had arrived. Kelly, facing professional ruin and public condemnation, had indeed decided not to go down alone. Her whistleblower revelations would provide exactly the evidence needed to support the audit Tyrone had demanded. Sometimes, justice comes from unexpected sources. Sometimes, the person who wrongs you becomes the catalyst for the very change you seek. And sometimes, Seat 17C is just the beginning of a much longer journey.